No, not the kind that softens a landscape, the kind that sharpens it, that makes everything quiet except for what it shouldn't. The sound was coming from below, something alive, trapped, furious about it. A man stood at the edge of a pit, looking down into the dark. The animal noise echoed off wet stone. There was no light down there, no room to run, no way to know how the footing would hold. He didn't call for backup. He didn't calculate the odds. He picked up his staff and went down. The sounds that followed, no one fully described. What they recorded was this: he came back out, alone. Who goes down into a lion's pit on purpose? Who faces a giant armed with only a stick and walks away with the giant's own spear? Who stops at the exact moment he has every right to act and turns around to ask for permission? His name was Benaiah, and the most important thing about him was never his strength. It was knowing precisely when not to use it. He came from Kabzeel, a town in the south of Judah, close to the edge of the Negev. His father was Jehoiada, not a soldier, a chief priest, a man of ritual and law, of sacred garments and incense, and the careful observance of things that had been written long before he was born. Lines. This was the world Benaiah grew up in. Not swords, scrolls, not battle formations, prayers. If you had told anyone in Kabzeel that Jehoiada's son would one day be the most trusted warrior in David's kingdom, the man responsible for the king's personal safety, the man who would hold the blade of an entire era, they would have looked at you the way people look at things they cannot quite understand, but cannot quite dismiss either. Benaiah's name meant Jehovah has built. It takes a long time sometimes to understand what you were built for. The first record we have of him is not a promotion, it's a fight. Two warriors from Moab. The biblical record calls them Ariels, a word that carried the weight of something like lions of God. The kind of fighters that other fighters told stories about. Men whose names were known before they entered a room. Benaiah killed both of them. The text doesn't linger on the Moabites. Neither will we. What matters is what it tells us about the kind of man Benaiah was. His first documented act was taking on opponents who were already legendary. He didn't start at the bottom of the ladder. He started at the top and climbed anyway. But the lion is what makes him impossible to forget. The day was cold enough to snow, which is rare enough in that region that the record mentions it specifically. A lion had fallen into a water pit, or been driven in, trapped, in the dark, in the cold, furious. Someone needed to deal with it. Benaiah volunteered to go down. Think about what that means for a moment. A pit is not a battlefield. You can't maneuver in a pit. You can't retreat in a pit. A lion in open ground is already dangerous. A lion in a pit, with a man climbing down toward it, is a scenario that was designed, by geometry alone, to end exactly one way. Benaiah went down anyway. We don't know how long it took. We don't know what he used. We don't know at what point the lion stopped being a threat and became a memory. We know he came back out. That detail, the climbing back out, is the one that stays, because descending was a choice. And choices like that don't come from calculating odds. They come from something deeper, from a man who has already decided, somewhere far back, what kind of person he is going to be, in the moments when it costs something. The Egyptian giant came later. A man of remarkable size, armed with a spear, a weapon that gave him reach, that gave him range, that should have given him every advantage against someone carrying only a wooden staff. Benaiah walked toward him anyway. At some point, the record gives us the outcome, not the choreography. Benaiah took the spear out of the giant's own hands and used it. The weapon that was supposed to end him became the instrument of the giant's own defeat. David heard about all of this. He gave Benaiah command of his personal bodyguard, the Cherethites and the Pelethites, the elite unit that guarded the king's life directly. And then he made a record of his mighty men. He listed their deeds. He assigned their ranks. He noted that Benaiah was distinguished even more than the 30. More than 30 of the finest warriors in Israel. Benaiah surpassed all of them. Then David wrote the next line, "But to the rank of the 3 he did not come." The 3, the inner circle, the names that would be remembered before all others. Benaiah was not among them. The text moves on immediately, as if this were simply administrative, as if ranking a man 4th in a list he had outperformed from top to bottom required no further comment. And Benaiah, as far as we know, never said a word about it. Years passed. David's kingdom was not the peaceful arrangement that kings prefer. His own son would see to that. Absalom was everything a rival should be, young, magnetic, beautiful in the way that made people stop talking when he walked by. He spent years positioning himself, collecting grievances, collecting followers, building toward a moment that, when it came fast. Half the kingdom turned. Military commanders who had served David for decades recalculated. They looked at the direction of the wind, and they moved with it. Benaiah did not move. This is easy to say and almost impossible to fully understand. Loyalty in stable conditions is not loyalty, it's comfort. Loyalty shows what it actually is only when staying becomes the harder choice. When David fled Jerusalem, the king walking out of his own city, weeping, his head covered, his feet bare, Benaiah was with him, not because the odds were good, they weren't. Not because the outcome was clear, it wasn't. He was there because David was there, and Jehovah had placed David where David was. That was enough. Absalom's rebellion collapsed eventually, the way rebellions built on ambition tend to collapse, suddenly, and with irreversible consequences for the man at the center. But the political landscape never fully settles after something like that. It just reorganizes itself around the next pressure point. The next pressure point had a name, Adonijah, David's eldest surviving son, charming, ambitious, following a script that should have felt familiar to everyone watching. He arranged a feast. He invited David's military commanders. He invited key figures in the court. He was building a coalition, piece by piece, and he wanted witnesses who could later become allies. He did not invite Benaiah. He didn't invite Benaiah because he already knew the answer. There was no point in extending an invitation to a man whose loyalty was not available for negotiation. Benaiah's absence from that feast was not an oversight. It was recognition. Adonijah understood, even if he never said it plainly, that man will not come. Think about what it means to be so consistently faithful that your enemies stop trying to recruit you. Adonijah moved forward without Benaiah. He declared himself king before David had died. He began acting as if the matter were settled. But David was not finished. He summoned Benaiah. He gave the command. Benaiah led the escort, the Cherethites and the Pelethites, down to the spring at Gihon. Solomon was placed on the king's own mule. The anointing happened. The trumpet sounded, and the earth shook with the shouting. The noise was so great, so sustained, that Adonijah and all his guests, still at their feast, heard it from where they were. And they understood immediately what it meant. The coalition dissolved in the time it took for sound to travel. Benaiah brought Solomon to the throne. The man who was never listed among the 3 had just changed the history of Israel. He had not done it by storming a palace or winning a battle in the open field. He had done it by being exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was asked, across the full length of an entire career. Solomon began his reign, and the reign required order, and order required decisions that David had not been able to bring himself to make while he was still alive. Adonijah made one final mistake. He approached Solomon's mother with a request that revealed his intentions with complete clarity. Solomon understood what it meant. He summoned Benaiah. The order was given. Benaiah carried it out. Then there was Joab. Joab was not a simple case. He had been David's greatest general for decades, brilliant, relentless, intensely capable, and deeply compromised. He had shed blood that Jehovah had not called for. He had defied the king's orders when it served him. He had accumulated the kind of unresolved history that destabilizes kingdoms from the inside. He heard that judgment was coming. He ran to the tent of Jehovah, the sacred space, the place where the altar stood. He grabbed the horns of the altar. He was claiming sanctuary. And Benaiah arrived at the entrance of the tent and stopped. He didn't hesitate, because he was afraid. Benaiah had killed lions in water pits. He had taken a spear from a giant's hands. He had stood beside a king in flight and not considered leaving. Fear was not what made him stop at the threshold of that tent. He stopped because something was true about where he was standing that required acknowledgement before anything else could happen. This was the altar of Jehovah, and a man who had spent his entire life in proximity to what was holy, the son of a chief priest, formed in the world of what is sacred and what is not, could not step past that threshold as if it were nothing. He sent word to Solomon. Joab said this, "What do you command? Not, I will handle it. Not, give me a moment." He went back. He asked. He waited for the answer from the one Jehovah had placed in authority. Solomon's answer came back clear. The altar was not meant to shield those who had deliberately shed innocent blood. Joab had used violence in ways that Jehovah had not sanctioned throughout a career that stretched back decades. The sacred space was not a mechanism for the guilty to escape accountability by clutching something holy. Solomon said, "Carry out the order." Benaiah went back in and did what he had been sent to do. Then Solomon appointed him commander of the entire army, the position Joab had held, the highest military authority in the kingdom. The man who was never among the three was now above all of them. The record after that goes quiet. No more battles documented specifically to Benaiah's name. No more legendary feats. No speeches. No recorded conversations. He commanded Solomon's army, and, as far as we can tell from what was written, he did it faithfully, without drama, until the record simply stops mentioning him. This is how the lives of deeply faithful people tend to look from the outside. Not a single spectacular ending, just a long, consistent, undramatic faithfulness that accumulates into something that is difficult to name, because the world tends to celebrate the moments of fire, not the years of steady burning. Benaiah never explained why he went into the pit. He never complained about the ranking. He never negotiated his loyalty when Adonijah's feast was happening without him. He never overstepped at the altar. He never needed the recognition to keep going. Jehovah saw all of it. Every choice that no one filmed, every moment of restraint that no one applauded. Every morning he showed up and did what the assignment required, without adding to it or subtracting from it according to his own preferences. Jehovah saw, Jehovah built. That is what his name meant. Jehovah has built. And Jehovah builds slowly, with repetition, with the same kind of faithfulness that the thing being built will eventually have to demonstrate. Benaiah was built one impossible choice at a time. This is where your story meets Benaiah's. Not in the pit, not on the battlefield. In the ordinary moments that nobody documents. In the places where the choice is quiet and the consequences are real and no one is watching. Maybe you are in a season where faithfulness feels like it's costing you something, and the accounting doesn't seem fair. Maybe you have been the one not invited to the table, excluded not by mistake, but because someone already knew exactly where you stood. Maybe you are standing at the threshold of something, and you are not sure whether to step forward or step back and ask. Every time you choose to stay when leaving would be easier, you are being like Benaiah. Every time you carry out what Jehovah has asked, even when the moment is difficult, you are being like Benaiah. Every time you stop at the edge of something sacred and choose reverence over efficiency, you are being like Benaiah. Every time you keep going without needing the recognition to fuel you, you are being like Benaiah. And Jehovah knows that. Jehovah sees your effort. He sees it when no promotion comes. He sees it when your name is not among the first three. He sees it when you show up anyway, without anyone announcing it, without anyone recording it, without anyone fully understanding what it cost you. Keep going, because every quiet choice you make in the direction of what is right is building something in you and in the world around you that will outlast the moment you are in right now. And when you look at Benaiah's story, here is the question worth sitting with. If your loyalty were as steady as his, would the people trying to build things without Jehovah even bother to send you an invitation? If something in this story stayed with you, share it with one person who needs to hear it. Every life that gets told faithfully reaches further than the one doing the telling ever knows.
If you enjoyed this content, subscribe so you don't miss the next inspiring Bible story.